Jake Morrison stepped through the sliding doors of the Galactic Academy of Xenobiology and felt his jaw drop. The main hall stretched out before him like a massive cathedral, its crystal walls reaching up toward a transparent dome that showed the swirling colors of deep space. Floating platforms carried students of dozens of different species between levels, while holographic displays showed rotating images of alien worlds and their creatures. A tall, purple-skinned being with 4 arms and tentacles instead of hair approached him. The creature wore flowing robes that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. "You must be the human student," the being said in perfect English, though its voice had a musical quality that made Jake's teeth ache. "I am Professor Velik of Centauri Prime. Welcome to Kepler 7 Station." Jake adjusted his backpack and tried not to stare at the professor's tentacles, which moved constantly as if they had minds of their own. "Thank you, Professor. I'm Jake Morrison. From Earth's Colonial University? Excellent. You arrive at the perfect time. Come, let me show you to your first class." As they walked through the corridors, Jake noticed other students turning to look at him. Most seemed curious rather than hostile, but he felt like an exhibit at a zoo. He was used to being the only human in a room, but this was different. Here, he was not just outnumbered but completely outmatched in every physical way. A group of students near a large window caught his attention. One looked like a walking suit of armor made from black metal, with glowing red eyes visible through its helmet. Another appeared to be made of living crystal, its body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the floor. A third student seemed to shimmer and fade, as if it existed only partially in this dimension. "Those are your classmates, Professor," Velik explained, noticing Jake's stare. "Zek is from Krill Prime, one of the harshest volcanic worlds in the galaxy. Lisa comes from the Etherian Collective, a species that has mastered dimensional manipulation. And that is Corvin from the ice world of Glacius 7, Jake nodded, trying to process this information. Earth's first contact with alien life had happened only 50 years ago, and humans were still considered newcomers to galactic society. Most of what Earth knew about other species came from trade negotiations and diplomatic meetings. This was his first time seeing so many different aliens in one place. "Do not worry," Professor Velik said, apparently reading his expression. "Everyone here is quite friendly. Your species has an excellent reputation throughout the galaxy. Humans are known for being peaceful and reasonable, very good at trade and diplomacy." They entered a large circular classroom with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central platform. The seats were clearly designed to accommodate different body types, with some large enough for massive creatures and others shaped for beings without standard limbs. "Please, take any seat you like," Professor Velik said. "Class will begin in a few minutes." Jake chose a seat in the middle section and looked around as other students filed in. Each one seemed more impressive than the last. A snake-like creature with 6 arms slithered into a specially designed coiled seat. A being that looked like a walking tree took a position near the back, its branches rustling softly. 2 identical creatures that seemed to be made of living metal moved in perfect synchronization to seats on the opposite side of the room. "Hey there, new guy," said a voice beside him. Jake turned to see a humanoid figure with blue skin and large black eyes. "I'm Nix from Aquatica 9. You must be the human everyone's been talking about. I'm Jake. Nice to meet you. So, Earth is a garden world, right? All peaceful and green?" Nix's voice carried genuine curiosity. "I heard your whole planet is basically one big nature preserve." Jake paused, not sure how to answer. Earth had certainly been described that way in most galactic databases. It's single quotes s.diverse. We have lots of different environments. That's so cool. My world is 90% ocean, and most of it is pretty dangerous. I can't imagine living somewhere so safe and calm. Before Jake could respond, Professor Velik stepped onto the central platform and raised 2 of his 4 arms. The classroom fell silent immediately. "Welcome, students, to Advanced Predator Studies. This semester, we will examine the apex predators of 12 different worlds, studying their hunting strategies, evolutionary adaptations, and ecological roles. The professor's tentacles moved in what Jake guessed was excitement. This is the first time we have attempted such a comprehensive interspecies study. Each of you represents a unique world with its own evolutionary history. A holographic display appeared above the platform, showing a rotating image of a massive creature with multiple rows of teeth. Predation is one of the most important forces in shaping life throughout the galaxy. Understanding how different worlds have produced their apex hunters will help us better understand evolution itself. Jake found himself leaning forward, genuinely interested. He had studied biology on Earth, but the chance to learn about alien ecosystems was incredible. Your final project will be to present your homeworld's apex predator to the class, Professor. Velik continued. Not just a hologram or recording, but a live specimen. The Academy has prepared secure containment facilities for this purpose. The classroom buzzed with excited whispers. Jake heard Zek, the armored student, talking about something called a razor maw from his volcanic world. Lissa, the shimmering being, mentioned a shadow stalker that hunted through dimensional rifts. Do not worry about safety, Professor Velik added quickly. All specimens will be kept in quantum containment fields. There is no danger to students or staff. Jake felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. A live specimen? Earth's apex predators were impressive, but most of them were either extinct or too large to transport. Tigers, sharks, bears, they were all dangerous. But compared to creatures from high-gravity worlds or dimensions beyond normal space, they seemed almost tame. Professor, Jake raised his hand. What if our homeworld's apex predator is difficult to transport? Ah, the human speaks up. Professor Velik's tentacles curled in what might have been amusement. Do not worry, young Jake. Earth is known for its gentle creatures. Perhaps a large herbivore. Your planet's megafauna must be quite impressive in their own way. Several students chuckled, not unkindly. Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment. I'm sure you'll figure something out, said Nix, patting Jake's shoulder with a webbed hand. Maybe one of those big grazing animals? I heard Earth has some really large plant eaters. Yeah, that could work, Jake mumbled. Sinking lower in his seat. As the class continued, Professor Velik outlined the semester's curriculum. They would spend the first several weeks studying predator theory, learning about different hunting strategies and evolutionary pressures. Then each student would present their apex predator, explaining its adaptations and demonstrating its hunting techniques. Jake tried to pay attention, but his mind kept wandering to the problem at hand. What could he possibly present that would not embarrass both himself and his entire species? Earth's predators were impressive by human standards, but in a galaxy full of creatures that could manipulate dimensions and survive in environments that would instantly kill any Earth animal, they seemed pathetically weak. The class ended with Professor Velik assigning reading on convergent evolution in predator species. As students filed out, Jake noticed several of them looking at him with what seemed like pity. Don't worry about it, Nick said as they walked toward the dormitory section. I'm sure Earth has some interesting animals. Maybe not as flashy as some of the others, but interesting in their own way. Jake nodded and smiled, but inside he was already dreading the next few weeks. How was he supposed to compete with creatures that could phase through solid matter or survive in molten rock? He was representing not just himself, but his entire species, and he was going to fail spectacularly. As he lay in his small dormitory room that night, looking out at the stars through his window, Jake wondered if he had made a terrible mistake coming here. The other students were friendly enough, but they clearly saw humans as harmless creatures from a peaceful world. How could he possibly change that impression? He had 3 weeks to figure it out. 3 weeks had passed since Jake's first day at the academy, and the time for presentations had finally arrived. The classroom had been transformed into something resembling a gladiatorial arena, with reinforced barriers and multiple layers of containment fields humming with energy. Professor Velik had warned the students that some of the creatures they would see today had never been observed by other species. Jake sat in his usual seat, trying to calm his nerves as he watched the other students prepare. Each one seemed confident and excited about their presentation. Zek, the armored student from Krill Prime, was checking a large metal container that glowed with internal heat. Lisa, the dimensional being, had brought what looked like an empty cube that seemed to bend light around its edges. "Are you ready for this?" Nix asked, sliding into the seat next to Jake. The blue-skinned student from Aquatica 9 carried a sealed tank filled with murky water that occasionally flashed with bioluminescent patterns. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied, though his stomach was churning. He had spent the last 3 weeks researching every possible option, but nothing seemed impressive enough. Lions, tigers, bears, sharks, they all seemed like house pets. Compared to what his classmates were bringing, Professor Velik stepped onto the central platform and raised his forearms for silence. His tentacles writhed with what Jake had learned was excitement. "Today begins our study of apex predators across the galaxy. Remember, these creatures represent millions of years of evolution, each perfectly adapted to their environment." The first presentation was by Corvin, the Ice World student who appeared to be made of living crystal. As he activated his containment field, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Inside the field, something began to take shape, a creature that looked like a cross between a polar bear and a praying mantis, but made entirely of ice and shadow. "This is a frost reaper from Glacius 7, Corvan explained, his voice ringing like breaking glass. "Our world experiences temperatures that would instantly freeze most life forms. The frost reaper has evolved to not just survive, but to thrive in these conditions." The creature moved with deadly grace, its movements too fast to follow properly. When it struck at a piece of metal that Corvan had placed in the containment field, the metal shattered like glass, frozen solid in an instant. "The frost reaper can lower its body temperature to absolute zero," Corvan continued. "It hunts by freezing its prey solid, then consuming them at leisure. On our world, even the other predators flee when they sense a frost reaper nearby." Jake watched in fascination and growing dread. The creature was beautiful in a terrifying way, and clearly lethal beyond anything Earth had ever produced. The other students were taking notes and asking technical questions about the creature's metabolism and hunting patterns. The next presentation was by the snake-like student, Seth, her containment field filled with a dense green fog that seemed to move with purpose. Through the mist, Jake could see shapes moving, not one creature, but dozens of them, all working together. "These are hive runners from the desert world of Zarian," Seth explained, her forked tongue flicking out as she spoke. "They are not individuals, but parts of a collective consciousness. What you see here are just the scout forms. The true apex predator is the hive mind that controls them." The creatures in the fog moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism, with dozens of bodies. They communicated through chemical signals that created complex patterns in the mist. When Seth introduced a holographic prey animal into the containment field, the hive runners surrounded it in seconds, working together to bring it down with surgical precision. "The hive mind can control thousands of these bodies across vast distances," Seth continued. "On Zarian, there is nowhere to hide from the hive. It sees everything, knows everything, and never stops hunting." Jake felt his palms sweating. 2 presentations in, and both creatures were so far beyond anything Earth had produced that it was almost laughable. How could he possibly compete with beings that could freeze matter at the atomic level or coordinate attacks across continents? The presentations continued throughout the week. Lysa's Shadow Stalker was perhaps the most terrifying of all, a creature that existed partially in another dimension, able to phase through solid matter at will. It hunted by stepping partially into reality, grabbing its prey, and then disappearing back into dimensional space where the prey would slowly be consumed by otherworldly forces. The Walking Tree student, who called himself Groot 7, presented something he called a World Eater. It looked like a massive flower at first, but when it opened its petals, Jake saw that each one was lined with thousands of tiny teeth. The creature could consume entire forests in a matter of hours, growing larger with each meal until it was the size of a small mountain. Zek's presentation was particularly spectacular. The Razor Maw from Krill Prime was a creature of living metal and crystal, forged in the volcanic fires of its homeworld. Its body was covered in natural blades that could cut through any known material. When it moved, it sounded like a sword being drawn, and its eyes glowed with the heat of molten rock. "The razor maw is not just a predator," Zek explained, his voice echoing from within his helmet. "It is a living weapon. On Krill Prime, we do not hunt the razor maw, we worship it. It is said that the first razor maw was born from the heart of our planet's core, and that it will outlive the stars themselves." Day after day, Jake watched presentation after presentation, each one more impressive than the last. The amphibious student from Aquatica 9 brought a toxin swimmer that could dissolve solid rock with its acidic secretions. The gas giant dwellers presented a void-touched leviathan that existed partially in dark matter and could manipulate gravity fields. Jake took careful notes on each presentation, asking thoughtful questions about hunting strategies, evolutionary adaptations, and ecological roles. His classmates began to appreciate his insights, often nodding at his observations or building on his questions. But Jake could see the pity in their eyes when they looked at him. They were clearly wondering what pathetic creature the human would present. "So, Jake," Nick said one evening as they sat in the cafeteria, "have you decided what you're going to bring from Earth? I mean, your world must have some interesting predators, right?" Jake looked up from his meal, a carefully prepared selection of foods that wouldn't poison his human digestive system. Around the table sat several of his classmates, all looking at him with curious expressions. "I'm still working on it," Jake replied diplomatically. "Earth has a lot of options." "What about those big cats I've heard about?" asked Lisa, her form shimmering slightly as she spoke. "Tigers, I think they're called, or sharks," suggested the metal-based student Pharaoh. "Water predators are always impressive." Jake nodded and smiled, but inside he felt like crawling under the table. Tigers and sharks were impressive by Earth standards, but after seeing creatures that could manipulate dimensions and survive in molten rock, they seemed almost comically weak. "I'm sure whatever you choose will be educational," Professor Velik said, appearing at their table with a tray of what looked like glowing soup. "Earth's predators may not be as dramatic as some others, but they must have their own unique adaptations." The professor's tentacles curled in what Jake had learned was meant to be reassuring, but it only made him feel worse. Everyone was trying to be kind, but their expectations were so low that even meeting them would be embarrassing. That night, Jake lay in his dormitory room, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out his options. He had studied every major predator from Earth's history, both extinct and living. None of them seemed even remotely capable of impressing his classmates. He had 1 week left before his presentation. 1 week to figure out how to represent Earth's apex predators in a way that wouldn't make his entire species look like weaklings. The weight of representing humanity pressed down on him like a physical force. Jake rolled over and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue world that suddenly seemed very far away and very unimportant. He had come here to learn about the galaxy's predators, but all he had learned was how outmatched his own species was. With a sigh, Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow he would have to face another day of spectacular presentations from his classmates, and each one would make his own upcoming presentation seem more hopeless. He had no idea that his real education was just beginning. The day of Jake's presentation arrived with the weight of inevitability. Word had spread throughout the station that the human student would finally reveal Earth's apex predator. The classroom was packed with curious observers, not just his classmates, but students from other courses, junior faculty members, and even some maintenance staff who had heard about the presentations. Jake stood outside the classroom door, taking deep breaths and trying to calm his racing heart. In his hands he carried nothing. No containment unit, no protective gear, no warning signs. Just a simple data pad with his notes. Through the door's window, he could see his classmates settling into their seats. Zek's armored form gleamed under the lights as he discussed something with Lisa, whose dimensional shifting had become more pronounced with excitement. Nix waved at the door, probably wondering where Jake's equipment was. Professor Velik's voice echoed from within the classroom as he introduced the final presentation. Today we conclude our study of apex predators with Earth's contribution. While Earth may not have produced creatures as dramatic as some we have seen, I am sure we will learn something valuable about evolution on garden worlds. Jake pushed open the door and walked into the classroom. The conversations died immediately as everyone turned to look at him. He could see the confusion on their faces as they noticed his empty hands. "Where's your containment unit?" Nix called out from his seat. "Did the transport fail?" asked Pharaoh, the metal-based student. Jake walked to the center of the room and set his datapad on the podium. He looked out at the sea of alien faces, all waiting expectantly for him to explain why he had no equipment. "Thank you all for coming." Jake began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I know you're all wondering where my apex predator is." He paused, letting his eyes move across the room. "The truth is, I've been struggling with this presentation for weeks. You've all shown me creatures that are beyond anything I imagined possible. Beings that can manipulate dimensions, survive in conditions that would destroy most matter, coordinate attacks across continents." Several students nodded sympathetically. They had clearly expected this confession. "I spent weeks trying to figure out what I could possibly bring that would be worthy of this class," Jake continued. "Tigers, sharks, bears, wolves, they all seem so pathetic compared to what you've shown me." Professor Velik's tentacles curled with what Jake recognized as concern. "Jake, perhaps we could arrange for you to present at a later date when you've had more time to prepare." "No, Professor. I'm ready to present now." Jake's voice carried a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "I'd like to introduce you to Earth's apex predator." The room fell silent. Everyone looked around, searching for a hidden containment field or some piece of equipment they had missed. "You're looking at it," Jake said simply. The silence stretched on for several seconds. Then nervous laughter began to ripple through the classroom. Surely the human was making some kind of joke. "I'm completely serious," Jake said, his tone remaining calm and factual. "Humans are the most successful predators in Earth's history." The laughter died away as Jake's expression didn't change. Professor Velik's tentacles stopped moving entirely, which Jake had learned meant the professor was deeply confused. "But that's impossible," Zek said, his voice echoing from within his helmet. "Humans are herbivores. Everyone knows that. Your species are peaceful traders." Jake tilted his head slightly. "Who told you we were herbivores?" "The galactic databases," Lissa said, her form shimmering with uncertainty. "Earth is classified as a garden world populated by peaceful mammals. The databases are correct about Earth being a garden world," Jake replied. "But they're wrong about humans being herbivores. We're omnivores. We eat both plants and animals." "But your species is known for being peaceful," Professor Velik interjected. "You've never been involved in any galactic conflicts." "That's true," Jake acknowledged. "But being peaceful doesn't mean we're not predators. It means we're smart enough to know when not to hunt." The confusion in the room was almost visible. Jake could see his classmates struggling to process this information. Everything they thought they knew about humans was being challenged. "Let me explain what I mean," Jake said, activating his datapad. A holographic display appeared above the podium, showing an image of Earth from space. Earth is indeed a garden world, but it wasn't always that way. The image changed to show prehistoric Earth with massive creatures roaming across the landscape. 65 million years ago, Earth was dominated by creatures you would recognize as proper predators. Massive reptiles with teeth like knives, some as large as your razor maw, Zek. Another image appeared showing the mass extinction event that ended the dinosaurs. But then a catastrophe wiped out most of the large predators. The survivors were small, adaptable creatures that could hide and scavenge. Jake changed the image again, showing the evolution of early mammals. From these survivors, many species evolved. But one group developed something special. Something that would make them the most dangerous predators the galaxy has ever seen. "What was that?" asked Nix, leaning forward in his seat. "Intelligence," Jake replied. Not just problem-solving intelligence, but the ability to work together, to plan, to adapt to any environment. The holographic display showed early humans working together to hunt massive mammoths. My ancestors didn't have claws like your Razormaw Zek. They didn't have the ability to freeze their prey like your Frost Trooper, Corvin. They couldn't phase through dimensions like your Shadow Stalker, Lisa. Jake paused, letting his words sink in. But they had something better. They had the ability to turn any weakness into a strength. The display showed human hunters tracking prey across vast distances. Early humans developed what we call persistence hunting. They would track a prey animal for days, weeks if necessary, never giving up, never stopping. The prey would run until it collapsed from exhaustion, and then my ancestors would simply walk up and finish it. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The idea of being hunted for days without rest was clearly disturbing to them. But that's not the scary part, Jake continued. The scary part is what happened next. Humans didn't just hunt animals. They hunted ideas, concepts, problems. They saw something they couldn't understand, and they studied it until they could control it. The display showed the progression of human technology, from simple tools to complex machines. In less than 10,000 years, humans went from hunting with spears to controlling the power of the atom. They mapped their entire planet, cataloged every species, and then began reaching for the stars. Jake could see that his classmates were starting to understand. The casual dismissal was being replaced by something that looked like growing concern. Every major species on Earth was either hunted to extinction or domesticated by humans, Jake saw. The massive predators that once ruled the planet were reduced to small populations in protected reserves. The entire planet became human territory. But your species is so small, protested Pharaoh. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. That's exactly what makes us so dangerous, Jake replied. We don't rely on our bodies, we rely on our minds. We turn everything around us into a weapon. Jake activated another hologram, showing human tools and weapons throughout history. Spears, bows, guns, explosives, humans have always been tool users. But more than that, we're tool makers. We see a problem and we create a solution. The display showed modern human technology. Spacecraft, energy weapons, terraforming equipment. When humans reached the stars, they didn't just explore. They studied. Every world they visited, every species they encountered, they cataloged and analyzed. Professor Velik's tentacles began to move again, but slowly, as if the professor was thinking very hard. Are you saying that humans have been studying us? Jake smiled, and for the first time it wasn't entirely friendly. Professor, what do you think I've been doing here for the past month? The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could see the realization dawning on faces throughout the room. They had been thinking of him as a harmless student, but he had been studying them, learning their weaknesses, understanding their capabilities. I've been watching your presentations, Jake continued, taking notes on your predators, your worlds, your technologies, learning how you think, how you react, what frightens you. He gestured to his classmates. That's what humans do. We study our environment until we understand it completely, and then we figure out how to control it. The room was so quiet that Jake could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. His classmates were staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to growing alarm. The question you should be asking, Jake said softly, is not whether humans are predators. The question is, what are we hunting? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake could see his classmates exchanging worried glances, their previous pity replaced by something that looked dangerously close to fear. Professor Velik's tentacles had gone completely still, which Jake had learned meant the professor was either deep in thought or deeply alarmed. Perhaps we should examine this claim more scientifically, Professor Velik said finally, his musical voice carrying a note of uncertainty. If humans are truly apex predators, then you should be able to demonstrate the physical adaptations that make this possible. Jake nodded as if he had been expecting this challenge. Of course, Professor. Let's start with the basics. He stepped closer to the center of the room, moving with an easy confidence that several students noticed for the first time. First, let's talk about human sensory systems. Everyone here knows that predators have forward-facing eyes for depth perception and tracking prey. Jake pointed to his own eyes, looking directly at each student in turn. Humans have excellent binocular vision. We can judge distances accurately, track moving objects, and focus on targets while maintaining awareness of our surroundings. Several students shifted uncomfortably as Jake's gaze met theirs. There was something unsettling about being looked at so directly by those forward-facing eyes. But that's not unusual, Zek protested. Many species have forward-facing eyes. True, Jake agreed. But humans also have something called persistence vision. We can track a target for hours without losing focus. Our eyes don't tire the way most species do. Jake activated his data pad, and the holographic display showed a human eye in cross-section. Human eyes are designed for long-distance tracking. We can see clearly at ranges that would challenge most species. We can also detect movement that other creatures would miss. What about physical strength? Asked Pharaoh. Predators need to be strong to take down prey. Excellent question, Jake replied. Human strength isn't about raw power. It's about efficiency and endurance. Jake began to walk around the room as he spoke, his movements smooth and controlled. The human body is built for persistence hunting. We have the most efficient cooling system in the galaxy. Our sweat glands allow us to regulate body temperature during extended activity. He stopped walking and looked at his classmates. How many of you could run for an hour without stopping? The silence was telling. Most of the students came from worlds where quick bursts of speed or strength were more important than endurance. I could run for 3 hours without stopping, Jake said matter-of-factly. And I'm not even in particularly good shape by human standards. To prove his point, Jake began jogging around the classroom. His breathing remained steady, his movements fluid. He ran for 10 minutes straight, covering the equivalent of several miles, while his classmates watched in growing amazement. This is impossible, Nix whispered. How is he not tired? Jake stopped running and wasn't even breathing hard. This is what persistence hunting looks like. A human can track prey for days, running them to exhaustion. The prey runs as fast as it can, but humans just keep coming. Never stopping, never giving up. Professor Velak's tentacles began to move again, but slowly. This is disturbing, but surely this is just physical adaptation. True predators need more than endurance. You're absolutely right, Jake said. Physical adaptation is just the beginning. The real advantage humans have is cognitive. Jake returned to the center of the room and activated his data pad again. The holographic display showed a human brain with different regions highlighted in various colors. The human brain is the most complex predatory organ in the galaxy, Jake explained. It doesn't just process information, it creates models, runs simulations, and develops strategies. The display changed to show humans working together to hunt large prey. Humans are pack hunters, but unlike most pack species, we can coordinate complex strategies involving hundreds or even thousands of individuals. That's not possible, Lisa said, her dimensional form shimmering with agitation. No species can coordinate that many individuals effectively. Watch, Jake said simply. The holographic display changed to show a human military operation. Thousands of soldiers moved with perfect coordination, each unit knowing exactly what the others were doing, all working toward a single goal. Humans develop something called language, Jake explained. Not just simple communication, but complex information transfer. We can share detailed plans, coordinate timing, and adapt strategies in real time. Jake paused the display and looked at his classmates. But that's still not the most dangerous thing about human predation. What is? Asked Corvin, his crystalline form reflecting the classroom lights nervously. Pattern recognition, Jake replied. Humans are the best pattern recognition predators in the galaxy. We can observe a system, identify its weaknesses, and develop strategies to exploit them. The display changed to show various human inventions throughout history. Humans looked at birds and created flying machines. They looked at the ocean and created submarines. They looked at the power of the sun and created nuclear weapons. Several students gasped at the last image. Nuclear weapons were banned by galactic law, considered too dangerous for any species to possess. You have weapons that can destroy planets? Professor Velik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We have weapons that can destroy solar systems, Jake corrected. But that's not the point. The point is that humans see a problem and create a solution, always. Jake began walking around the room again, but this time his movement felt different. Less casual, more purposeful. Several students found themselves tracking his movement unconsciously. For the past month, I've been studying all of you, Jake said. Your species, your worlds, your technologies, your weaknesses. He stopped in front of Zek's seat. Krill Prime has extreme temperatures and volcanic activity. Your species needs those conditions to survive. Remove the heat and you become sluggish and weak. Zek's armor seemed to dim slightly. How do you know that? Because I've been watching you, Jake replied. Every time the classroom temperature drops even slightly, your movements slow down. It's subtle, but humans are very good at noticing subtle things. Jake moved to stand in front of Lisa. The Etherian collective exists partially in dimensional space. Your physical forms are actually quite fragile. A disruption in local space-time would strand you in this dimension, where you'd be vulnerable. Lisa's shimmering became more pronounced. That information is classified. Not anymore, Jake sighed. I've been analyzing your dimensional shifts, timing them, looking for patterns. Humans are excellent at reverse engineering technologies just by observing them. Jake continued around the room, stopping in front of each student. Nix, your species needs constant moisture. Dry air makes you weak. Furrow, your metal-based biology is vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Corvin, your crystalline structure has natural fracture points that could be exploited. Each revelation was met with shocked silence. Jake had identified weaknesses that most of these species tried to keep secret. How? Professor Velik asked. How could you possibly have learned all of this? Because that's what humans do, Jake replied. We study everything around us until we understand it completely, and then we figure out how to control it. Jake returned to the center of the room and faced his classmates. Every species in this room has shared information about their homeworlds, their cultures, their technologies. You've been teaching me how to defeat you. The silence was so complete that Jake could hear individual students breathing, or in some cases their equivalent of breathing. But here's the really frightening part, Jake continued. I'm not special. I'm not a trained soldier or a spy. I'm just a graduate student, an average human. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed images of human settlements across the galaxy. There are billions of humans spread throughout known space, all of them studying, learning, adapting, all of them turning every environment into hunting grounds. What do you want? Asked Nix, his voice barely audible. Jake's expression softened slightly. That's the thing. Humans don't want to hurt anyone. We've learned that the most successful predators are the ones that don't need to hunt. What does that mean? Professor Velik asked. It means we've discovered something that most predators never learn, Jake explained. The best hunting strategy is to make your prey want to feed itself to you. Jake gestured to the classroom around them. Look where we are. An educational institution where species from across the galaxy come to share their knowledge, their secrets, their weaknesses. You invited us here. You're teaching us everything we need to know about you. The full implication hit the room like a physical blow. They hadn't just been studying alongside a human. They had been voluntarily sharing strategic information with what might be the most dangerous predator species in the galaxy. And the best part, Jake added with a smile that no longer seemed friendly, is that you're happy to do it. You think you're helping us learn. You think you're being kind to the peaceful humans from the garden world. Jake picked up his datapad and prepared to leave. Thank you all for a very educational semester. I've learned more than I ever expected to. As he headed for the door, he paused and looked back at his silent classmates. Oh, and by the way, Earth's Colonial University. Jake walked through the corridors of Kepler-7 station with the same casual stride he had used for the past month. Nothing about his appearance had changed. He still wore simple clothes, still carried his basic datapad, still looked like an unremarkable graduate student. But now the few aliens he passed in the hallways seemed to notice him differently. Word of his presentation had spread quickly through the station's communication networks. A group of junior researchers from the engineering department stopped their conversation and stepped aside as Jake approached. They watched him pass with expressions that mixed curiosity with something that looked like worry. Jake nodded politely to them, the same friendly greeting he had always given. But they didn't respond. Professor Velik had dismissed the class immediately after Jake's presentation, claiming that the students needed time to process the information they had learned. Jake suspected that what they really needed was time to figure out what to do about the human who had just revealed himself to be a walking intelligence gathering operation. Jake's destination was his small dormitory room on the station's residential level. As he walked, he noticed that the usual bustle of student activity was subdued. Small groups of aliens huddled together, speaking in hushed voices. Several times, he caught fragments of conversation that stopped abruptly when the speakers noticed. Him nearby? ... Can't be true, they're too peaceful ... Been watching us this whole time ... Should contact the council. Jake reached his room and activated the door lock with his palm print. The small space looked exactly as he had left it. A simple bed, a desk with his personal computer, and a small viewport showing the stars beyond the station. He had lived here for a month, but now it felt different. Like a hunter's blind where he had been observing prey, he sat at his desk and activated his personal computer. The screen flickered to life, showing a secure connection to Earth's communication network. After a moment, the screen filled with the face of a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and piercing blue eyes. Jake Morrison reporting in. Jake said, his voice taking on a more professional tone than his classmates had ever heard. Dr. Hayes here, the woman replied. I watched your presentation through the station's educational feed. Very impressive work. Jake leaned back in his chair. Thank you, ma'am. The intelligence gathering exceeded all expectations. We now have detailed profiles on 12 species' top predators, their homeworld environments, and their technological capabilities. And their weaknesses, Dr. Hayes added with a slight smile. Extensive documentation of their weaknesses, Jake confirmed. Each species revealed more than they intended to. The educational environment made them comfortable sharing information they would never reveal in a diplomatic setting. Dr. Hayes nodded approvingly. That's exactly what we hoped for. The Colonial Intelligence Service has been looking for ways to gather strategic information without triggering defensive responses. Academic exchange programs appear to be perfect for this purpose. Jake pulled up files on his computer, showing detailed profiles of each of his classmates. The Krillians are vulnerable to temperature manipulation. The Etherians can be trapped in normal space with dimensional disruption. The Aquaticans dehydrate quickly in dry environments. All of this information was gathered through simple observation and casual conversation. What about the faculty? Dr. Hayes asked. Professor Velik has been particularly informative, Jake replied. The Zentarians are a highly advanced species, but they're also completely trusting. They share information freely with anyone they consider a colleague. I've learned more about their biotechnology and dimensional science than our best intelligence operatives could have discovered in years of covert surveillance. Dr. Hayes made notes on her own computer. Excellent. This confirms that expanding human enrollment in galactic educational institutions is our best strategy for long-term intelligence gathering. There's more, Jake said. The station's computer systems are surprisingly open to students. I've been able to access course materials, research databases, and even some administrative files. The aliens don't seem to understand the concept of information security. That's not surprising, Dr. Hayes replied. Most galactic species evolved in environments where sharing information was beneficial for survival. They don't have the predatory instincts that make humans naturally suspicious, Jake nodded. It's almost too easy. They want to teach us about their worlds, their cultures, their technologies. They think they're being helpful to a young species that's just learning about the galaxy. And in a way, they are, Dr. Hayes said. Just not in the way they intended. What's your assessment of their threat level? Jake considered the question carefully. Individually, many of these species are more physically capable than humans. The Krillians could tear apart a human in single combat. The Etherians could phase through any physical barrier we might construct. The Aquaticans have biotechnology that's centuries ahead of ours. But, Dr. Hayes prompted, but they're not thinking like predators, Jake explained. They're thinking like prey. They see strength in terms of individual capability, not collective strategy. They don't understand that humans don't need to be stronger than them. We just need to be smarter. Jake pulled up a star chart showing human settlements across the galaxy. We've been establishing colonies and trading posts for 50 years. Every human outpost is a potential intelligence gathering station. Every human trader is a potential scout. Every human student is a potential spy. And they welcome us, Doctor Hayes observed. They welcome us, Jake confirmed. They think we're harmless. They think we're their friends. They have no idea that we're mapping their territories, cataloging their resources, and studying their weaknesses. Dr. Hayes leaned forward on the screen. What's your recommendation for the next phase? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. We need to be careful not to reveal too much too quickly. The presentation today was necessary to complete the academic assignment, but it may have made some of the aliens suspicious. We should scale back the revelations and focus on maintaining the image of peaceful cooperation. Agreed. What about expanding the program? Definitely proceed with expansion, Jake said. But we should diversify our approach. Send students to different types of institutions, military academies, research facilities, cultural centers. Each environment will reveal different types of information. Dr. Hayes nodded. I'll pass your recommendations to the planning committee. What's your next assignment? I've been invited to present my research at the Galactic Xenobiology Conference. On Alpha Centauri Station, Jake replied. It's a gathering of the galaxy's top researchers. The intelligence value could be enormous. Excellent. You'll maintain your cover as a graduate student, of course. Of course, Jake agreed. Though I suspect it will be more challenging now. Word of today's presentation will spread. Some species may be more cautious around humans in the future, Dr. Hayes smiled. That's fine. Caution is just another form of behavior to study. If they change how they interact with us, we'll learn from that too. Jake heard footsteps in the corridor outside his room. He glanced at his door security monitor and saw Nix approaching, looking nervous and uncertain. I have a visitor, Jake said quietly. One of my classmates. Handle it carefully, Dr. Hayes advised. Maintain your cover, but be prepared to extract if necessary. The communication screen went dark, just as Nix knocked on the door. Jake took a deep breath and opened it, putting on the same friendly smile he had worn for the past month. Hey, Nix, Jake said. What's up? The blue-skinned alien looked uncomfortable. I wanted to talk to you about your presentation today. About what you said about humans being predators. Sure, come on in, Jake said, stepping aside to let Nix enter. What did you want to know? Nix sat on Jake's desk chair, his large black eyes fixed on Jake's face. Are you really here to study us? Jake sat on his bed, maintaining a casual posture. I'm here to study xenobiology just like you. That's what the program is for. But you said humans have been gathering information about other species. You said you've been studying our weaknesses. Jake nodded. I have been studying everyone. That's what good students do. They observe, they learn, they try to understand how different systems work. But you made it sound like you were preparing to hunt us. Jake's expression became more serious. Nix, let me ask you something. If I wanted to hurt you, would I have told you about human capabilities? Would I have revealed that I'd been studying your weaknesses? Nix considered this. I don't know. Think about it, Jake said. A real predator doesn't warn its prey. A real predator doesn't explain its hunting strategies. A real predator doesn't give its prey information that could be used to defend against it. Then why did you tell us? Jake stood up and walked to his viewport, looking out at the stars. Because I wanted you to understand something important. Humans are predators, that's true. But we're also intelligent enough to know that the best predators are the ones who don't need to hunt. What does that mean? Jake turned back to face Nix. It means that humans have learned something that most predators never learn. The strongest relationship isn't predator and prey, it's mutual benefit. We study other species not because we want to hurt them,